Some of you might be wondering if the Buckeyes will fall in the upcoming CFP rankings that will be released tonight. Well, we'll discuss where the Buckeyes will land, predict what the committee will do today here on Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes for the Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Tuesday, November 8th in the year 2022. And today's episode of Locked on Buckeyes is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. During today's episode, we welcome to the podcast Mr. Gary Stokan. Gary is the president and CEO of the Peach Bowl. Gary and I discuss what it would mean to the Peach Bowl for Ohio State to play in a semifinal game down in Atlanta, Georgia. But before we get to any of that, the CFP rankings will be released once again this evening, 7 p.m. Eastern time on the ESPN. The debut rankings of this season came out a week ago. We'll get another edition released tonight, and some of you might be wondering if the Buckeyes will fall in the poll tonight. A week ago, the first rankings came out of the season. 1 through 6 went like this. Number 1, Tennessee. Number 2, your Buckeyes of Ohio State. Number 3, Georgia. Number 4, Clemson. Number 5, the team up north. Number 6, Alabama. 3 of the 6 teams I just mentioned lost a week ago. Tennessee lost to the number 3 team, Georgia, 27-13. Number 4, Clemson lost it. They got dominated at Notre Dame, an unranked team with the final score of 35-14. And then Alabama. Saban loses, America wins. Alabama lost to the number 10 team in the country, the LSU Tigers, 32-31 in overtime. Mason Taylor, the son of Jason Taylor, caught the game-winning 2-point conversion. And with that in mind, we also remember Ohio State and how they played against Northwestern. The windy conditions, the weather in mind, did not derail and get in the way of Ohio State. And that's not why they played, got in the way of Ohio State, but that's not why they played sometimes undisciplined football. At times they were not keying on their assignments, setting the edge, no matter throw the starter or back up. Things were really, really off for the Buckeye football team. And some of you might be wondering, will the Buckeyes fall? Well, I will just predict what will happen tonight during the rankings. And you're going to hear it first right here on this here podcast. Number 1, I think, will be the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia, last year's national champion. They play in the SEC. They just beat the number 1 team in the country, Tennessee, who has been playing phenomenal football all year long. Georgia, I do think, jumps Ohio State, has one more ranked win in their resume. Georgia, the number 1 team in the country. That's my prediction for tonight. Number 2, I think the Buckeyes stick at number 2. Now, I have been on the record numerous times right here saying that I don't believe Ohio State played like the number 2 team in the country a week ago. That does not mean they're not the number 2 team in the country. That just means they're not playing like they are that team, playing like someone who I believe, hey, that team right there, that's the number 2 team in the country. Number 1 is down in Athens. They did phenomenal things over the weekend. Hey, how you play is how you play, and I have a high standard for college football teams and a high standard for the Buckeyes. Even though they didn't play like the number 2 team in the country, I still think they'll be the number 2 team in the country because I think the margin between the Buckeyes and the Wolverines is a lot closer than some might think. I said a week ago, I think it was on a postcast. I stated that I'm starting to get a little nervous, more nervous than I was even a week ago about the game Thanksgiving weekend against the team up north because the Buckeyes are slipping post-bye week. but I still think they're the number 2 team in the country. Number 3, I believe, will be the team up north, with Clemson losing. That is one notch above moving up for them, and I think that's simply going to be that easy. Move them up one notch. With Tennessee losing, I don't think Tennessee with 1L will be in. I do. I think Tennessee with 1L will be in the top 4, but I don't see them being a team that is going to be ahead of the team up north. I think 3 is the team up north. 4 is Tennessee. Weird, but I think they get the non-SEC bias, beating Nick Saban in Alabama. I think 4 is going to be Tennessee. 5, TCU, an undefeated team who just beat Texas Tech, an unranked team over the weekend by 10 points, 34-24. I think that TCU is 5. The Big 12 not getting the love, not getting the attention that I do believe many think that they will get down the road. They're not getting it today. 5 is TCU. 6 is the Oregon Ducks. Oregon, who keeps winning, just beat an unranked Colorado Buffalo team by 39 points. Final score 49-10. Buckeyes stay at number 2. But if they come out this coming week against Indiana, a team that the team up north struggled against, and they beat them, but it didn't play very well the entire time. If they come out struggle against Indiana, who can't figure out the quarterback situation, if they come out on the road against Maryland and struggle there, hey, I could easily see the Buckeyes falling in the poll, even though they are an undefeated team. Hey, Ohio State needs to play like the number 2 team in the country, or excuse me, like they're the best team in the country. They dominated almost everybody throughout the first 6 games. Once things got tougher, the Iowa, a road game against Penn State, a road game against Northwestern, back-to-back road games. You got to come out and firing. You got to come out and act like you want to play. You got to come out and act like you are the Ohio State University football team. Because if not, the opposition, who is a lesser opponent than you, who is going to be an underdog in that game, a massive underdog, might come out victorious. And we don't want any Urban Meyer-esque laydowns and bad performances that we got when Urban Meyer was the Ohio State football team. We don't want those under Ryan Day in 2022, because we're going to come on here and discuss them and honestly not be too fond and not speak too favorable of the game and the football that we just watched. The Buckeyes have a chance to be in the Final Four in the playoff at the end of the season. The Peach Bowl is one of those bowls as a playoff game in 2022. What do you think the CEO and president of the Peach Bowl thinks about the possibility of Ohio State playing in the Peach Bowl in 2022? We'll hear from this individual, Gary Stokan, the president and CEO of the Peach Bowl, next right here on Locked On Buckeyes. This week's thrilling moment in college football is brought to you by Nissan. The thrilling designs behind the new lineup of Nissan are intended to empower drivers in vehicles as capable as the driver themselves. When I think of unbelievable abilities on the field for this week's thrilling moment, it has to be Mayan Williams once again, coming up big and huge for this football team. Talked about it a day ago. Can't get away from it today. Mayan Williams, when the Buckeyes needed somebody on the ground to get the job done, when they were not able to do anything in the windy conditions in the Windy City, Mayan Williams got to the end zone not once, but twice. The thrilling moment brought to you by Nissan goes to my guy, Mayan Williams. This segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at NissanUSA.com. Thanks for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your fine podcast. Joining us now here on Locked on Buckeyes, it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome Mr. Gary Stokan. He is the president and CEO of the Peach Bowl Incorporation. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Jay, thanks for having us. Look forward to talking with you.
Yes, sir. We are on the heels of a wild, weird college football weekend where Alabama lost to LSU, Clemson lost to Notre Dame, and we're here after a weird Ohio State game talking about the possibility of Ohio State playing in the college football playoff, possibly the Peach Bowl later on this year. But Gary, I mentioned something to you earlier just about Ohio State and them not playing in the Peach Bowl ever in their history. What would it mean to you and the Peach Bowl group and the organization if Ohio State was lucky enough to play in the Peach Bowl in this season?
Well, Ohio State's one of the biggest brands in college football, and so to have them play in anybody's game, I did some research on the top 20 broadcasts over 9 weeks, and Ohio State is in 4 of those top 20 rankings of viewership. So Ohio State's a great brand, obviously, from a national TV perspective. Their fans are incredible, the way they follow the Buckeyes. They have a lot of fans down here in the Southeast and in the metro Atlanta area. And, Gene Smith and Ryan Day are just great people, good to work with. So we look forward to hosting Ohio State if we had the opportunity.
What do you think about this year's Ohio State football team?
Well, I saw Ohio State against Wisconsin, and I thought, at that time, and probably still do, I think Ohio State and Michigan probably have the best offensive lines in college football. And obviously, when they're all healthy, the wide receiver, even when they're not healthy, I think they may have the best wide receiver core in the country. And certainly C.J. Stroud has to be up for the Heisman, the type of numbers he's put up and the type of player he is.
Yeah, it's pretty insane to think about how Ryan Day, in just a short amount of time, has built upon the foundation that Urban Meyer built and made following Jim Tressel and the interesting way that Urban Meyer came into. Ryan Day took it to a different level. You mentioned Stroud specifically. I thought Justin Fields was going to be the best Ohio State quarterback I would ever see in my lifetime. And then C.J. Stroud comes around, and he's doing amazing things in Columbus as well. Imagine that being down in Atlanta, the college football capital, as that is the home of the Hall of Fame. Gary, I'm not in your shoes, but just a thought. You talk about the eyeballs that Ohio State gets and the viewership. But imagine even Stroud, that amazing quarterback, maybe after winning the Heisman, playing in Atlanta. I mean, just a thought of that makes me excited because I know how big football is down there in the Southeast. The path and the travel would be pretty easy for the Buckeyes to get down to Atlanta. So everything, if that worked out, Stroud in Atlanta on that big stage, that's something I think I personally would love to see. And I think everyone down there in the Southeast would love to see Ohio State down there as well.
We would be tremendously proud to have Ohio State. Their whole, as I said, Gene Smith all the way down, to have C.J. Stroud, who obviously, as you mentioned, has to be up for the Heisman this year. And certainly the fans that the Buckeyes have and the viewership that goes along with hosting Ohio State, and certainly the team who has put themselves, right there, number 2 in the country, have put themselves right there to be in the mix of, playing for the national championship and playing in the semifinal game in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl potentially.
Now, if I get this correct, the Peach Bowl is also the organization that runs the Chick-fil-A kickoff. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Imagine how crazy it would be. I know down the road, Ohio State and Alabama play in a regular season game. Imagine how crazy it would be if in 2024, when Ohio State plays down in Miami for the Mercedes-Benz game, but then prior to that, this year, they possibly play in Atlanta, and then down the road in the Chick-fil-A kickoff. I mean, it's a lot of eyeballs just down in Atlanta. And I think Ryan Day would love that because it helps recruiting. So it helps, I do believe, the Peach Bowl and their notoriety and their publicity, just simply what that bowl has done and the revenue it brings, not just to college football, but also to the city of Atlanta. But also, like Ohio State itself, new quarterback will be there. Hopefully Ryan Day's still there. It would really be quite an amazing thing that toward the end of Alabama's tenure with Nick Saban, Ryan Day and Ohio State face off there in the Chick-fil-A kickoff game. I know it's down the road, more probably forecast in the future, but that also would be an amazing thing as well, and maybe something where maybe it's in the works now. I don't know the behind-the-scenes conversations you have had, but it would be nice if that was a thing in a few years when Alabama and Ohio State play in the regular season.
Jay, from your lips to God's ears, I need to hire you because I'd love to have Alabama play Ohio State in our Chick-fil-A kickoff game. We do have Clemson playing Georgia in 2024 to open the season. And, over the next few years, in 2024, if the playoff does move forward in 24, we would host a quarterfinal game in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And then in January, we would host the national championship game in Atlanta. And then in 25 season, we host the national semifinal game. So, 3 really good opportunities for Ohio State. Obviously, this year, the semifinal, 25 a semifinal, 25 after the 24 season, the national championship game. Hopefully, one of those years, we do see Ohio State playing in Atlanta.
That would definitely be a nice thing if that was to happen down the road. But this also makes me pause and realize you mentioned 22, 24, 25, talking about possibility of expansion, a quarterfinal game, being down there in the Peach Bowl. Well, prior to 2014, it was a BCS from 98 until 2013, and the Peach Bowl was not a part of that exclusive foursome of bowls. I believe it was a Fiesta Bowl, Orange Bowl, Rose Bowl, and Sugar Bowl. They added the Cotton Bowl and the Peach Bowl once the CFP became a thing, and that's a part. All 6 of those bowls are part of the New Year's Six. So that was a new journey, a new venture for you and your business and in your career, but also a great opportunity for the Peach Bowl, because prior to that, they still had the BCS, still having just those 4 bowls, BCS bowls, and then the national championship. There would be probably no chance still for it to be Ohio State down there in the Peach Bowl. But here we are in 2022. Things have changed. Things have evolved. What are your thoughts about simply being a part of this exclusive group of the New Year's Six?
Well, it's really interesting. In 2006, when the BCS had those 4 bowls that you mentioned, they were going to add another bowl game to run a championship game. And we put in a very strong bid, thought we were going to win. And the 4 existing bowls, the Rose, Sugar, Orange, and Cotton, Fiesta, made an appeal to the BCS commissioners to host their bowl game and then 2 weeks later rotate the national championship. So we lost that opportunity. Ironically enough, the NCAA legislated a 12th game to the schedule. And I told my board, I said, well, if they're not going to let us in the BCS on the backside of the year, we're going to start the BCS on the front side of the season. And so we started the Chick-fil-A kickoff game and opened up with Clemson versus Alabama in 2008. And we've been on that run ever since. Both teams have since won national championships. And Alabama, if Nick Saban were on, he would tell you, when they came in ranked 25th that year and Clemson was number 9, Alabama won 34-10. The next year we had them against Virginia Tech, number 7, and Alabama was number 5 in our Chick-fil-A kickoff game. And Alabama won the national championship with 19 kids from Georgia on their roster. So Nick Saban would tell you that was the start. 2008 was the start of the Alabama run they've been ever since. So, we've been a part of changing the face of college football on the front side of the season to the point now where you have Ohio State scheduling Notre Dame in the first game of the year.
Yeah.
Prior to us starting the kickoff game, that would have never happened. So, it feels great to be a part of that. And then to elevate ourselves with the advent of the CFP, to join the CFP in 2014 and host the first CFP game with Ole Miss and TCU. And now to host semifinals in 16, 19, we'll host them this year in 22, and then again in 25. Atlanta has really grown with the sport of college football. And, as you said, a lot of people call us the capital of college football now because of the great games we've been able to put on with the kickoff games, the SEC championship every year, the CFP games, the College Football Hall of Fame being here. So it's a great place for college football. Our fans get it. The corporations support it, and we're very blessed to have great volunteers, great staff, great board, and great corporate support and fan support here in Atlanta.
I even went back and looked at Simply this year, and I didn't realize it was the past couple of years that the game on – you guys had the Chick-fil-A kickoff game, I believe it's on a Saturday. Then I saw somewhere that you guys have a Monday night game as well. How crazy would it be down the road, Gary? I don't know if I'm just spitballing stuff out and maybe it's already in, you've already thought about it or not. But then that Saturday, then even that Sunday, which is normally on a campus, just take the whole weekend. Like, I know it's kind of crazy to have 3 games in 3 days in one venue, but back to back to back right there in the Peach Bowl. You talk about how it helped the recruiting of Alabama back in 2008. It would also greatly help Ohio State's recruiting if that was a thing where they were able to play in that bowl, maybe not that Saturday, maybe not that Monday, but it could be that Sunday where there's no NFL football. All eyes are on one spot, Atlanta. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's going to happen. These are just thoughts that run through my mind as you discuss what's happened since the Chick-fil-A kickoff game has been a part of the college football opening weekend.
Well, ironically enough, we almost did that with Ohio State a couple years ago when Oregon and Ohio State were scheduled to play. And because Oregon didn't think it was going to get a game back in 2031 or 32, something like that, we had talks with Ohio State and Oregon to play that game in Atlanta. I think it would have been on a Sunday because we had a Saturday and a Monday game already scheduled. In 2020, we had 3 games scheduled in a week. We had Florida State, West Virginia on Saturday, Georgia, Virginia on Monday, and North Carolina, Auburn on that next Saturday, which has never been done, 3 games in a week. And unfortunately, COVID caused the cancellation of all 3 of those games. But, you know, ironically enough, the first week of the season, and this is through 9 weeks, the first week of the season, 4 games are ranked in the top 14 viewerships of college football. You had Ohio State Notre Dame as 3rd most viewed game of this season. You had Florida State LSU, which was on that Sunday, the first week, is number 5. Our Georgia Oregon game and the Chick-fil-A kickoff game is number 8. And the Georgia Tech Clemson game on Monday is number 14. So there's 4 games that first week of college football that still are the top viewed games through 9 weeks of college football. That's how strong and important that first week of college football is, because people are starved to see college football again on TV.
Yes, they are. Gary, we're almost up out of time. I want to end it with this thought here. You mentioned the future of the Peach Bowl and how there will possibly be, well, there will be involvement in the expansion of the college football playoff. 12 games, not sure when it's going to happen. But if it is, it could be a quarterfinal game, a semifinal game, national championship game, possibly in back-to-back years. What are what are your thoughts about the expansion? Do you think it helps the sport? I think you believe it helps the sport just based off some things you said already. But what are just some of your general thoughts about the future and the expansion of the college football playoff?
Well, I can debate it both ways. I think right now we're in the midst of a playoff. You know, number 1 played number 3 this last weekend. Number 6 played number 10. You know, number 4 played, you know, an unranked team that I think is going to be ranked this week.
Correct.
So you're seeing ranked teams. Ohio State's going to play Michigan, you know, in 2 weeks. Number 1 or number 2 or number 3 playing each other. So I think we have a playoff going on right now. As with respect to the 12-team playoff, if the commissioners agree to move it forward in 2024 and 2025, you know, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl would host the quarterfinal in 24 and then a semi in 25. Moving forward to 26 and beyond, obviously those are all new negotiations between CFP. We hope we've done enough to support college football and the CFP to be a part of those going forward. But, you know, I think it's going to be great for college football. You'll see more teams that are in the mix longer. So if you have 12 teams and 12 bids, you know, teams in November right now, there's a lot of teams that are still going to be in play. Whereas with the CFP right now, you know, you can cut it down pretty much and start to see, okay, if this happens, if this happens, what could be the potential Final Four? So I think it's going to be great for college football, more people involved, and certainly Ohio State doesn't have to worry about that. They're always in the mix.
Yes, they are. Gary, it's been fun having you on the podcast. It's been a fun conversation. Got to learn a lot more about the Peach Bowl Inc. Not just the Peach Bowl game, but also the Chick-fil-A kickoff game, and mention how it helped Nick Saban in his early tenure at Alabama. Possibility of Ryan Day going down there with Ohio State there this year in the Peach Bowl. It could honestly jumpstart and make the recruiting at Ohio State even bigger and better than it already is. Gary, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And I would love to see Ohio State play down there in Atlanta in the Peach Bowl in a semifinal game because, as you say, football's crazy down there. There's a lot of Ohio State alumni down there. I just love watching football down there as well. So it's a great combination for me personally. I think it's even better for the football team and the possibility of playing in the Peach Bowl for the very first time this year. Gary, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jay. We'd love to host you here in December. So we appreciate you having us.